So today's daf in Meretz Hashem. Today's daf is daf Chavtes. We have a very exciting Mishnah in the Gemara in front of us today. So we're gonna pick up. Okay, we're gonna pick up in Meretz Hashem on the bottom of Chav Ches on the base 28b. 1 second, so let me just start the. All right, we'll say good morning. So first of all, let me begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Dobi and Nina Elman, for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Joshos this month in honor of their Dora Ayelet becoming a Bas Mitzvah. We wish Ayelet great mazel and hatzlacha as she blossoms into an incredible and strong Jewish woman. I apologize. There were a couple of dedications and sponsorships that I missed last week. My apologies to that. I want to thank David and Roberta Schwartz for dedicating the daf last week in honor of a birth of a baby girl to their children, Leon and Lily Schwartz, born our first David and Roberta's first grandchild, the granddaughter, born on Hanukkah, an incredible Hanukkah miracle. We wish the new Zaidi and Bubby a mazel tov, and of course, wish the parents incredible hatzlacha raising this precious little neshama. I also want to thank Milt and Melanie Gertner for dedicating the shir. Again, this was another one I missed last week. I apologize. In memory of Milt's mother, Fruma Bas Yitzchak, on the occasion of her 10th yahrzeit this past Shabbos. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah and Sham will have an aliyah, and the family ein nechama. And about with that, let us begin. So we are picking up in Meretz Hashem, last line on Chav Ches on the base 28b. So many masnisim. So both remember again in yesterday's daf. So we discussed the Mishnah, right? A brand new Mishnah that spoke about the idea that chametz shel nachi she'avar la Pesach, if you have chametz that belong to a Gentile over the course of Pesach, after Pesach it's mutar ba'ana, you're permitted to get benefit from it. But ultimately, again, chametz of a Jew after Pesach is going to be asur ba'ana. One is not permitted to get benefit from it. Why? Because the Torah says lo yira'eh l'cha sa'ar. So I'm saying yesterday's daf, we were trying to figure out whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect. So remember again, what the Gemara did was something very interesting. The Gemara first made the statement that the Mishnah can't be Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. In yesterday's daf, we then went through all of those shitos. Really fascinating daf. So now the Gemara is going to loop back. So Mani Masnisim. So whose opinion is reflected in our Mishnah? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, Chametz Tamar Kamatilu Dinachri. So we'll remember again, if it's Rabbi Yehuda Shita was that halacha lamaisa that ultimately again bein lifnei zmano bein la'achar zmano overlove belav. But this is actually quite fascinating because I think I know at least for me this is not the way I read Rabbi Yehuda Shita. By the way, the Gemara is understanding Rabbi Yehuda Shita. First of all, Chevron, it's so wonderful to see everybody, but it's so nice to get a view of the shul also, and so nice to see everybody there. Very very heartwarming. Wonderful to see all of you. So I'll say the Gemara says as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Shita was that halacha l'maisa. There is a lot associated with chametz before the Zman Isser, before Pesach, and after Pesach. Now, we'll say now what's amazing about this is as follows. If you notice, Rabbi Yehuda in his Shita never distinguishes between chametz of a Jew and chametz of a non-Jew, which fascinatingly enough leads the Gemara to understand that according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is an issur of chametz sha'avar alav ha-Pesach, even by a guy, which of course is incredible. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, if there was chametz owned by a guy over the course of Pesach, halacha l'maisa, that is asur ba'ana for a Jew after Pesach. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "The money must be in Rabbi Yehuda chametz tamar kamar rafilu denachri." If it's Rabbi Yehuda just says chametz after Pesach, and he doesn't qualify that statement. Chametz after Pesach is asur, which would indicate even chametz of a guy. So clearly that doesn't reflect the view of our Mishnah, because halacha l'maisa again, our Mishnah only says that it's chametz of a Jew. The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda, and if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, chametz. Be Rabbi Shimon, and if you want to say it's Rabbi Shimon, top of Chavtes. So remember again, Rabbi Shimon said chametz before Pesach and chametz after Pesach, there is no lav, there's no iser, and toch zmano, meaning during Yom Tov itself, during Pesach itself, there's a lav and there's kares. So the Gemara says, V'i Rabbi Shimon, first line of Tesmud Aleph, the Yisrael Nami Mishra Kasher, both according to Rabbi Shimon, there is no iser of chametz sha'avar alav ha-Pesach, ultimately again by a Jew, the Rabbi Yossi Haglili, the next Rabbi Yossi Haglili. So remember again, Rabbi Yossi Haglili wanted to say something amazing. These shitas, I was, last week, Shmuel Artman asked me, he said to me, he said, when you see some of these shitas in the Gemara, does it literally mean that like they paskined like this at some point in time? So it is very interesting to see that when you see some of these opinions espoused, lav dafka means that they paskin that way, because in general, even if you espoused a particular opinion, if you were the minority, you had to be smart enough to know, don't go like your minority opinion, but it's fascinating that it's out there. Rabbi Yossi really holds that halacha l'maisa chametz during Pesach is not asr b'hana. Is not asr b'hana, which is quite dramatic. Rabbi Yossi Halili, avil tos mano nami mishra kashari b'hana. So therefore, we'll say, so now we understand why the Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah does not reflect the view of any of these opinions. So I'll say, so now obviously we have to reconcile the Mishnah with one of these opinions because these are the opinions we have. Amr Rav Bar Yaakov, the older Rabbi Hudi. So also Rav Bar Yaakov wants to suggest that the Mishnah is really Rabbi Huda. I will say, remember again, let's be clear on our shitas. The shita of Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maisa, this was the last part of Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Rabbi Huda holds that before Pesach and after Pesach, there is a lav on chametz. When you say before Pesach, that means from the 6th hour to the start of Yom Tov, and chametz sha'avar lav Pesach is going to be aser b'lav. Toch zmano, during Pesach itself, lav and kares. Now, interestingly enough, the reason the Gemara suggested that the Mishnah can't reflect the view of Rabbi Huda is because we were understanding Rabbi Huda's statement to mean that even on chametz owned by a Gentile after Pesach, there is a lav, which clearly contradicts the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says that halacha of chametz shavar Pesach only concerns the chametz of a Jew. To which the Gemara says, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Huda. I will say, now watch this. It's quite fascinating. The Alif Sa'ar Da'achila Misa'ar De'Re'iyah. And ultimately, again, Rabbi Huda learns out Sa'ar of Achila from Sa'ar of Re'iyah. Now, what does that mean? Now, remember again, so we'll see in just a moment. The Gemara says, Ma Sa'ar De'Re'iyah Shalcha I'ataroah. Aval Ataroah Shalachirim. We'll see, just like with Bal Yira'eh, ultimately, again, you're only chayiv when ultimately again if it's your chametz. Aval atro shalachirim mishal gavoa, but you can go ahead and see others' chametz, right? If you see the chametz of others, or you see the chametz of hektish, halacha l'maisa, you are not in violation on Pesach. Av sa'ar da'achila. So too when it comes to the sa'ar of consumption, shelcha i'ata ochel, you are not permitted to eat your chametz. Aval ata ochel shalachirim b'shal gavoa, but you can go ahead and eat the chametz of others. Eat the chametz of others. We'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, the Olam Rabbi Yehudahi, the Afagav, the Nafgale Mikrai de la Afras Mano Aser, Krab is or the Yisrael Kamar Aval de Nachri Shari. So we'll say, so remember again, even though Rabbi Yehuda is saying that halacha l'maisa, after Pesach there is a lav, the pasuk from which he learns the lav for chametz sha'avar alav ha-Pesach is dafka talking about chametz that is owned by a Jew. So this is the drasha. So the Gemara says, "Yeah, avsor da'achila shalcha yata ochel abata ochel shalachilim mishal gaboa." So in reality, just like the din of Bal Yira, so this is Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. He's saying, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda is the author of the Mishnah, or the opinion reflected in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda will say as follows: just like on Pesach, you are only over on Bal Yira'eh with your own chametz, but you are not chayiv on Bal Yira'eh with someone else's chametz, a Gentile's chametz. A Gentile chametz, someone else. So halacha l'maisa again. So too over here, the Gemara says after Pesach, the lav only applies. The lav only applies to the chametz of a Jew, but ultimately again not to the chametz of others. So remember again, in this others category, you have a nachri, you have gavoa, ubedinhu di ibayde lemisne dafila bachila namishari. It was very interesting, and really the Mishnah should have actually written that after Pesach, the chametz of a nachri, we'll say, is not only mutter ba'ana, but it's actually mutter ba'achila. mutar ba'achila. You're actually allowed to eat it. Va'aydi detana di Yisrael aser bana, tana nami denachri mutar ba'ana. And halacha l'maisa, since the Tana wrote that Yisrael is aser ba'ana, wrote that Anachris is mutar ba'ana. So therefore, we'll say Rav Acha Bar Yaakov wants to suggest that our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And halacha l'maisa, what the Mishnah is teaching me, and Rabbi Yehuda is teaching me, is that just like, very simple drasha, just like Bal Yira'ah only applies to my chametz, ultimately again, so to the lav of chametz she'avar lav Pesach only applies quote unquote to my chametz. Now my chametz in this case will ultimately mean a Jew's chametz, will not apply ultimately to a Nachri's chametz, to the point that halacha l'maisa, excuse me, that halacha l'maisa, I should even be able to eat the chametz of a Gentile. The only reason the Mishnah didn't write that is because the Mishnah was saying that chametz she'avar alav haPesach for Yisrael is aser ba'ana. Since we phrased it as iser ba'ana, we wrote it by Nachri mutar ba'ana. Ubedinhu di ba'ilei l'misnafilo b'tovs ma'ano mutar ba'ana. And in reality, the Mishnah could have even written, but listen to this, that even within this man, the chametz of a Nachri should be mutar ba'ana. Va'aydi detani di Yisrael la'achar zmano. But since we're writing it regarding the chametz of a Jew after this man of Pesach, Tana nami dinachri la'achar zmano. So to ultimately, again, they phrased it as an Nachri. Achar zmano as us. There I will say, Rav Achar Bar Yaakov Shita is that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And although you thought Rabbi Yehuda was saying that when Rabbi Yehuda gave this statement that after Pesach, chametz is governed by a lav, and you assumed that that meant that halacha l'maisa, the lav applies to all types of chametz, even the chametz of a nachri. Kamash malon, no. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, just like chametz during Pesach is only aser if it's yours, i.e. of a Jew's, so too again chametz after Pesach ultimately again is also only going to be aser if it belongs to a Jew. But chametz of a nachri, technically speaking, is even mutar ba'achila after Pesach. The only reason the Mishnah is talking about hana is because to contrast it with the chametz owned by a Jew after Pesach. That chametz is not only aser ba'achila, but that chametz is going to be even aser ba'ana. And therefore, again, when it talks about the chametz of a nachri she'avar lav Pesach, it says that it's mutar ba'ana. But in reality, not only is it mutar ba'ana, it's even mutar ba'achila. Rava says no. The older Rabbi Shimon. So Rava wants to suggest that in fact our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. So remember again, Rabbi Shimon's position was chametz before Pesach and chametz after Pesach. There's no lav. No lav at all, nothing, no prohibition associated with it. And obviously during Pesach itself, ultimately again, there is a lav and kares. So Rava wants to suggest our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon kinasa kanis hoil va'avar b'bal yira'eh bal yimatzeh. And Rabbi Shimon says, very simple. What's it? It's very simple. Rabbi Shimon, it's knas. It's knas. That's what is meaning knas. It's a rabbinic penalty. That's all. That's all. The entire issue of bal yira'eh, of chametz she'avar lav Pesach, I will say, is exactly that. There's no psukim involved over here. This is a rabbinic penalty. So we'll say. So we're going to see. In fact, we're going to, should this, I'll leave the halacha for a little bit later. But again, we will see that this is indeed the approach that we accept. So we'll say the beauty of this is once you say that it's a rabbinic penalty, there's not really a need to try to find a source for chametz she'avar lav Pesach and any of the aforementioned psukim. So therefore, Rava could say the Mishnah could even reflect the view of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon holds there is no lav associated with chametz after Pesach. I'll call it before Pesach and after Pesach. The only isra of chametz is during Pesach itself, and then it's a lav and it's kares. It's a lav and it's kares. But halacha l'maisa chametz she'avar lav Pesach will be aser midrabanan. And it's a knas. It's a penalty. It's a penalty. Why? As I say, if a Jew retained ownership, ultimately again, over his chametz over Pesach, that means what? That Jew who owned that chametz, he was in violation of bal yira'eh, bal yimatzeh. It's very important, I will say. So therefore, again, what Rava will suggest that according to Rabbi Shimon, therefore, because a Jew violated with his chametz, Therefore, his chametz becomes usher to everyone. It becomes usher to the owner, but it also becomes usher to everyone else as well. So I will say let's contrast these positions. So therefore, I will say we have two opinions. Rav Acher Bar Yaakov holding that the Mishnah reflects the view ultimately of Rabbi Yehuda, and which again, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, therefore again, Rabbi Yehuda's understanding that just like Bal Yeroeh, ultimately again will only apply to chametz that is owned by a Jew. So to post Pesach in the Lav, again, the Isra of Chametz Shal Pesach will also only apply to chametz owned by a Jew. Rava is going to say simple, it's Rabbi Shimon, and the whole thing is a knas, the whole thing is a penalty. So let's analyze. Bishlam the Rava Hainu Diktani Shal Yisrael Aser. So according to Rava, the Mishnah reads well that it says Shal Yisrael Aser Mishum Shene'amar Lo Yirah. Well, see, remember again, the wording of the Mishnah was a little bit strange as well. Remember how the Mishnah read? The Mishnah said, Chametz shel nachri shavar lava pesach. You have a chametz of it. I'm just reading to the Mishnah for just a moment. Chametz that belonged to a Gentile that he owned over Pesach, and now it's post Pesach. Mutter ba'ana. You're permitted to get benefit from it. V'shel Yisrael aser ba'ana, but you can't get benefit from chametz owned by a Jew over Pesach. Why? Shene'emar lo yirah lecha sa'ar. Because the pasuk says lo yirah lecha sa'ar. So what does that pasuk lo yirah lecha sa'ar have to really do with chametz sha'avar lava Pesach? So the Gemara says like this. According to Rava, that makes sense, because according to Rava, the way to read the Mishnah is as follows: if a Jew retained ownership of chametz over Pesach and therefore transgressed the law of lo yirah, of bal yirah, therefore there is a rabbinic penalty that says that his chametz will be usher after Pesach as well. But according to Rav Acher Bar Yaakov, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda would hold that there's an Isra Hana on Chametz Shal Lava Pesach is Mishum Lo Ye'achel Chametz Miboile. Nothing to do with Bal Yerah, but rather he would learn that from the lab of Lo Ye'achel, as you saw in yesterday's daf. So the Gemara says, Misabris Areshakoi, Sefakoi, Areshakoi. No. Do you think that pasuk, when the Mishnah quotes the pasuk of Lo Yirah Lecha Sa'ar, do you think that's going on the end of the Mishnah? No, that's going on the beginning of the Mishnah. How so? That's what it means to say. Chametz shel nachri shavar lava Pesach. If you have chametz owned by a non-Jew, he owned it over Pesach, and now again it's after Pesach. So you have chametz owned by a Gentile over the course of Pesach, and now it is after Pesach. Mutter ba'ana. One is permitted to get benefit from it. Why? Mishum shene'amar lo yirah elecha. Because the pasuk says lo yirah elecha. Chametz shall not be seen to you. Shalcha iyat haroah. The Isra of Bal Yirah is only lecha, is only your own chametz. Aval ataro shalachirim v'shal gavoa. But you can go ahead and see the chametz of others, and there is no violation. The Yalif Su'ar Dachila, Misu'ar Diriyah. So therefore, that's what we just said before. And ultimately, again, we'll learn out the Su'ar Dachila from the Su'ar of Riyah, as we just mentioned before. And therefore, again, just like I'm not over on Bal Yirah, unless, of course, it's my chametz, so too, again, with post-Pesach consumption, I will not be over on the consumption of chametz after Pesach, unless, of course, it's my chametz. Therefore, we'll say, interestingly enough, the way it's not just that there's a machlokes in the authorship of the Mishnah. There's a fundamental machlokes how to read the Mishnah. Or so according to Rav Acher Bar Yaakov, who's going to suggest that the authorship of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk that the Mishnah quotes, Lo Yirah Lecha Sa'ar, is in fact not going on the case of Chametz Shal Yisrael, but rather going on the beginning of the Mishnah, Chametz Shal Nachri. Whereas according to Rava, who says that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon, the pasuk that's being mentioned is actually halacha l'maisa, talking about, so the pasuk that's being mentioned is actually talking about chametz shel Yisrael. Okay, it's an interesting reading of the Mishnah. And the Gemara says they both go according to their reasoning. De'itmar ha'ochel sa'ar shel nachri she'avar lava Pesach. If you eat sa'ar that belonged to a Gentile that he owned over Pesach, so the Gemara says. L'div Rabbi Yehuda, so the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda. So in other words, if you ate chametz that belonged to a nachri, let me say differently, a nachri owned chametz over Pesach, now you're consuming that chametz after Pesach. L'div Rabbi Yehuda, so we'll say, according to Rabbi Yehuda Shita, Rava Amar Loke, Rava will say you get malchus for it. Rav Acher Bar Yaakov Amar Eina Loke, and Rav Acher Bar Yaakov will say you won't get malchus for it. Rava Amar Loke, Rava will say you get malchus. Why? Lo Yalif, because ultimately, again, he doesn't learn it out. Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Yalif Rabbi Yehuda Sa'ar Da'achila Mi Sa'ar Deriyah. Because ultimately, according to Rava, he doesn't agree with Rav Acher Bar Yaakov's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, according to Rava Rabbi Yehuda does not learn out Sa'ar of Achila from Sa'ar Diriyah, and therefore, again, one will be right. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov Amar Ina Loka. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov will say you don't get Malchus. Why? Yalif Sa'ar Dachila Misa'ar Diriyah. Ultimately, again, he will say that Halacha Lamaisa you learn out Sa'ar of Achila from Sa'ar Diriyah. Good. So Moshe says that's the machlokes. Now watch this. It gets more interesting here. The Hadar Bei Rav Acha bar Yaakov Mehi. Now we'll say in reality, Rav Acha bar Yaakov recanted his position. He recanted his position. I will say, now watch this. Very interesting case. If one goes and eats chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash during Yom Tiv, or specifically during Chol Hamoed, what's the halacha? Ma'al, a person has committed mi'ilah. The Yeshomrim lo ma'al. Others say you haven't committed mi'ilah. But remember again, mi'ilah means illegal or mundane use of consecrated property. So what's going on over here? Man yish omrim. So we'll say, who is the opinion who says lo ma'al? Am Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. They say Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana haya oseh Yom Kippurim ki Shabbos tashlumin. Because Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana used to say that Yom Kippur is like Shabbos for tashlumin. So what does this mean? So this is a classic case the Gemara brings down that halacha l'mais. Imagine for a moment a person goes in and burns down a field on Shabbos. What's the halacha of a person burns down a field? So we'll say a person burns down a field on Shabbos. There are two prohibitions, right? There's havara, I've kindled something, and halacha l'maisa, there's also nezek, I've caused damage. So we know that there is a concept of kimle b'derabamine, that whenever you go ahead and engage in an act, and that act triggers two forms of liability, one monetary and one capital, right? So halacha l'maisa, the monetary damages are set aside because you're going to be executed. So Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana said he made Yom Kippur like Shabbos l'tashlumin. How so? Ma Shabbos mischay b'nafsho patur min tashlumin. Just like Shabbos, if you do something that violates Shabbos but also causes damage, once you're mischay b'nafsho, once there's a death penalty, patur min tashlumin. At Yom Kippurim mischay b'nafsho patur min tashlumin. So therefore, we'll say, for example, if somebody were to go ahead and burn down a field on Yom Kippur, and go ahead, what will be that? We'll say Yom Kippur. Violation of Yom Kippur is kares. Shabbos is skila. Yom Kippur is going to be kares. But still, Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana said that we make Yom Kippur just like Shabbos. So therefore, I will say, halacha l'maisa, the Ish Omrim who says lo ma'al would be Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Why? I will say, watch this. If you take a piece of chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash and you eat it on Pesach, so I will say, so there are two things that's happened over here, right? What are the two things? Number one, you ate chametz. Number two, you committed an act of mi'ilah. Eating chametz, right, is an iser kares. Going ahead and performing an act of or engaging in mi'ilah is dinei mamanis, right? Is ultimately again is going to be financial damages. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, the Gemara is suggesting that the Ish Omrim who say that if you ate chametz on Pesach, you are not subject to the laws of mi'ilah is none other than Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, who's the same person who said that if you burn down a field on Shabbos, you're not going to be chayv for damages. You burn down a field in Yom Kippur, you're not going to be chayv on damages. You ate chametz of the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach, you're going to be chayv kares for chametz, you're not going to be chayv for mi'ilah. Now the Yosef Amar, so Yosef says no. In reality, they are arguing about the following case. Can you go ahead and redeem kachin? So we'll say, so imagine for a moment, you have sacrificial items which cannot be consumed by a person. So can you go ahead and redeem them in order to feed them to dogs? So we'll say, so remember again, we're focusing on a brisa. The brisa says over here, ha'ochel chametz shel hektish b'moed ma'al, v'ish omrim lo ma'al. If a person went ahead and ate chametz of hektish on Pesach, some say he committed mi'ilah, some say he didn't commit mi'ilah. So also we're just trying to figure out whose opinions are being expressed over here. So the Gemara wants to suggest Rav Yosef Amar, Yosef says in reality, they're arguing about if you have kachim that are not consumable by an individual, can you redeem them in order to feed them to the dogs? I'm sorry, maybe that again. So the opinion who says that ultimately, again, you did commit mi'ilah, he holds he holds that in general you are permitted to redeem inedible kachim in order to give it to dogs. So what's the comparison here? Because essentially what the Gemara is suggesting is chametz, which belongs to hekdish, is pretty much like inedible kachim. So what can you do with inedible kachim? So according to the opinion who says that Allah inedible kachim can be redeemed and fed to dogs, That means even if it's inedible, it still has a value. If it has a value, then ultimately, again, it's subject to me'ilah. So the opinion who says that in general, ultimately, again, we'll say ma'al. The opinion who says that you did not commit me'ilah, halacha l'maisa kasavar ein podin. He will say that in general, if you have inedible kachim, you cannot redeem that in order to feed it to dogs. Good. So what's listen to this? So Rav Rava went ahead and taught this. And he taught it with the following lashon of Rav Yosef. The kuli ama in podin esak kachim lachilon leklavim. In general, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and redeem kachim, inedible kachim, to feed it to dogs, right? That's the general assumption is that halacha l'maisa, you cannot go ahead and redeem kachim to feed it to dogs. So we'll say here, what's the machlokes? This is very interesting. We'll say the davar hagore lemamon kimamon dami. So we'll say so the shaila over here is davar hagore lemamon. So we'll say, so listen to this. So what happens if halacha l'maisa, you have something that right now is valueless, but later on in time, ultimately again, it will be valuable. So what is the status if you damage something like that? So right now, the item is valueless, but later on it will be valuable. So we'll say, what's a good example of that? A person eats chametz of hegdish on Pesach. I eat chametz of hektish on Pesach. So once you say halacha l'maisa again, right now it's valueless. Right now it's totally valueless. But ultimately, again, wait a couple of days and it will be valuable. So the Gemara says, "Man da'amar ma'al." Remember, I just want to be clear. We're right now. Remember, the bigger discussion over here is the Gemara is going to suggest that Rav Achar Bar Yaakov recanted his position. Okay, that's what's driving this entire discussion. The way the Gemara is going to get there is through this brisa. I have a brisa that says, "Ha'ochel chametz shel hektish b'moed." If I eat chametz which belongs to the Beis Hamikdash during Pesach itself, ma'al, I have committed me'ilah. V'yesh omrim lo ma'al, and others say I did not commit me'ilah. So that's the machlokes that is unfolding over here. We're trying to figure out what is that machlokes based on. So remember again, we've had a couple of different possibilities. It's possible that the Ish Omrim who said that not ma'al was Rav Nechunya ben Akana about Kimim Rabbi Mine. The other possibility is Podin as Hakachim Lachila Meklavim. That's the second possibility. And now a third possibility ultimately is Davar Hagorim Mamon Kim Mamon Dami. That will say what happens if you quote unquote damage something that right now is valueless, but in a little bit of time will become valuable. Man da'amar ma'al. So the opinion who says ultimately again that you did commit milah when you eat chametz which belong to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach, or I should say it differently. On Pesach you ate chametz which belong to the Beis Hamikdash. So the man says ma'al kasavar davar hagarin l'mal v'kimam dami. He will still say even though chametz right now which belongs to the Beis Hamikdash is valueless, because chametz on Pesach generally is valueless, halacha l'maisa, because it will become valuable. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you're chayiv. And therefore, again, it's considered as if you've committed me'ilah. You've deprived the Beis Hamikdash of a valuable item. Uman damar lo ma'al, but the opinion who says lo ma'al kasavar davar hagon l'mamon lav kimamon dami. The opinion who says lo ma'al, he will hold that halacha l'maisa davar hagon l'mamon will say that if something is currently valueless, but it will become valuable, lav kimamon dami. Okay, so we'll say, so I just want to point out to you, this is in general, it's very exciting about Daf Yomi. You're beginning to see like just even looking at three incredible ideas that we've just had right now. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana's idea of kimim b'derabba minei, that's whenever you violate something, whether it's Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Pesach, and you did one act which generates dual liability. One for misa / kares, and then second for financial liability. The financial liability is set aside. And ultimately, again, it is the capital liability which remains there. Do we redeem kachim, inedible kachim? Do we redeem it to feed it to dogs? That's a machlokes. And I both say davar gon l'mamon kimamon dami. Ultimately, again, do we go ahead and we see that something that is valueless right now, but will become valuable if you damage that item? are you considered to have damaged something or not? So just pointing out three incredible Yisodistic ideas. So we'll say, so now watch this. Rav Achar bar Yaakov comes along and he says, we'll say everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa davar hagorin l'mamon kimamon dami. That's the Gemara is going to suggest over here. Everyone agrees there's something that is currently valueless, ultimately again, but will become valuable. It is as if you have engaged in a proper act of damage. In other words, you've damaged something of value. So what's going on in the brisa? Remember, all roads lead back to this brisa. Reuven consumes chametz. Reuven consumes chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. Reuven consumes chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. Has he committed an act of mi'ila or not? So first opinion says ma'al. Yesh omrim say lo ma'al. We are trying to figure out what is at the root of that machlokes. So it comes on the back, because I'm going to tell you. First of all, it was I just want to point out what the Gemara is pointing out over here is so far kind of racking this up. The Gemara is going to say, so number one, we don't redeem inedible kudshim to give it to dogs. That's Aleph. Beis, Rav Achar bar Yaakov is going to say, that in reality, if you damage something that is currently valueless, but will become valuable, it is as if you have truly damaged an item of value. So what's going on over here? So let's say, so what is the brisa? What is the Mishnah all about? All right, so we'll say, so again, what is the brisa of ha'ochel chametz shel hekdesh? What is that all about? To which the Gemara says, watch this. So the Gemara says, V'hacha. So what is the brisa all about? The pluted Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Shimon Kameflagi. Wow, this brisa is actually the machlokes Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon. Watch this. Man da amar lo ma'al Rabbi Huda. Man da amar ma'al Rabbi Shimon. The opinion who said lo ma'al, that's like Rabbi Huda, and the opinion who said ma'al Rabbi Shimon. We'll say what's going on over here. Take a look at Rashi. Man da amar lo ma'al Rabbi Huda. Da amar afla achara Pesach aser bana. The choshekain bePesach atzmo hilchach lav mamon ika di Yisrael lo chazi v'lav goyin lo mamon ika shem yifte lo yena mimenu u'lenachri lo mizdabin. So therefore, again, Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maisa, there is an isser on chametz after Pesach as well, an isser of chametz after Pesach as well. We'll say that halacha l'maisa. I'm sorry. So we'll say, so again, let me say that once more. The opinion who holds mandam or lo mal Rabbi Huda. So we'll say the opinion who holds that you don't commit mi'ilah when you eat chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. That is like Rabbi Yehuda. Because we'll remember again, like Rashi just said. Rashi said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz even after Pesach is aser bana, and all the more so on Pesach itself. Because it is aser bana, therefore what? It's not mabon. It's not considered to be an item of value. Furthermore, again, ultimately, it's not even a gorim lamamon. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're not permitted to go ahead and redeem inedible kachim to give it to klavim. Now, in this case, klavim would also be nachim. In other words, I can't go ahead and redeem inedible kachim in order to sell to a Gentile. The Gemara says mandar ma'al, and the opinion who says ma'al ultimately again would hold like Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara Rashi says mandar ma'al Rabbi Shimon damar ra'i v'la achar Pesach afla adam li'Yisrael v'havali g'olam. And Rabbi Shimon will say that since chametz becomes permitted after Pesach, therefore what? Therefore, halacha l'maisa, it is a davar hagorim l'malon, and therefore, again, you'll be chayiv if you damage it or if you consume it on Pesach. But one second, we'll say, remember again, the whole reason we got into this is because we wanted to show Rav Achar bar Yaakov recounted his position. For Rav Achar bar Yaakov would Amar Rabbi Yehuda Yolav Sar Dachilu Misar Deriyah. But one second, it was Rav Achar bar Yaakov was said before that Rabbi Yehuda learned out Sar Dachila from Sar Deriyah. Right? Rashi says over here, Misar Deriyah, V'shal Hektish Af BePesach Mutter. And was according to this, again, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the only type of chametz that's asr after Pesach is the type of chametz that was asr during Pesach. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz shel hekdish is not asr on Pesach. But yet here, ultimately, again, Rabbi Yehuda is saying this, Elahadra Bey, Rav Achar bar Yaakov miyahi. Rather, ultimately, again, you see that Rav Achar bar Yaakov recanted this position. Also, look at Rashi. Misar Deriya b'shal hektish after Pesach mutter, and therefore, again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, ultimately, again, that the chametz of hektish will be mutter even Pesach. V'hachar am Rabbi Yehuda lo mal. And ultimately here, we'll see according to Rabbi Yehuda, he did not commit milas. Therefore, we'll see, you see from here that Rav Achar bar Yaakov recanted his position, and therefore, again, he holds that even chametz after Pesach will be asur as well. Okay, Ravashi Amar Ducholi Alma. So also, I just want to point out, let's kind of bring everything together over here. So remember what we're trying to do. The way we started out ultimately again is we have a Mishnah, right? The Mishnah is it's funny how like such a straightforward Mishnah could cause such incredible machlokes, right? If you look at this Mishnah, when you read this Mishnah, you said, finally, a simple, straightforward Mishnah, yeah, and anything but a simple, straightforward Mishnah. Remember the Mishnah told me, Chametz shel nachri, shavar lava Pesach is mutar ba'na. Chametz shel Yisrael, after Pesach, is asr ba'na. And then the Mishnah quotes the pasuk Lo yira lecha sa'ar. Fine. So now remember the flow of the Gemara. The Gemara begins by saying our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of anyone, not Rabbi Huda, not Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yosei Galili. Then we went ahead and on Chav Chesam days went through all of those shitos. Then the bottom of Chav Chesam days we try to say, okay, who does the Mishnah reflect? And we had two opinions. We have Achar bar Yaakov, who wanted to say that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Huda, and Rava, who wanted to suggest that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Okay? We'll say, what just happened? The Gemara just said, oh, and by the way, Rav Achar bar Yaakov changed his tune. He recanted his position, which I will say means for us what? That we are left with only the opinion of Rava, who says that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. But 1 second, I will say, what did Rabbi Shimon hold? Rabbi Shimon hold there's no lav of chametz from 6 hours till the start of Pesach, and there's also no lav of chametz after Pesach. Well, if there's no lav before Pesach and there's no lav after Pesach, and the Mishnah says chametz she'avar lav Pesach, which belonged to a Jew, is going to be asar v'ana, how could that be Rabbi Shimon? To which the Gemara answers, kinas. It's a penalty. And that's why the Mishnah ends off with the pasuk. If you violated the halachas of lo yira, ba yira, there's a rabbinic penalty that says that halacha l'maaseh your chametz is going to be asur b'ana after Pesach. Good. So I'll say that was just the full circle. Here we go. So I'll say, but we're not finished yet. Now we're going to focus a little bit more on this brisa, because the brisa is really very interesting, right? To say, look how much conversation this brisa is stirring. So remember again, we'll say brisa telling us. Right? Someone goes, remember, this is the brisa. You eat chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach itself. Two opinions, ma'ol, lo ma'ol. Trying to continue with that brisa. Rav Ashi Amar, Ducholi Alma in Podin. Rav Ashi says, in reality, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa ain't Podin as hakachim la'achila l'klavim. That halacha l'maisa, you don't redeem inedible kachim to feed it to dogs. Okay. Number two, everyone also agrees. Everyone also agrees that something that is currently valueless but will become valuable, ultimately, again, if you damage it, you are chayiv for damages. What's the machlokes in the brayso? And ultimately, again, we'll say here, it's the machlokes Rabbi Yossi Haglili and the Rabbanan. Man da amar mal Rabbi Yossi, man da amar lo mal kirabanan. Ultimately, again, we'll say that the Gemara suggests that halacha l'maisa, the one who says ma'al holds like Rabbi Yossi, the one who says you're not ma'al is like the Rabban. I'm going to say, take a look at Rashi just a moment. Rashi, Omer d'choli ama in bod d'dagon l'mam l'afki mam l'dami. Kilomar d'choli am l'nafki l'm d'ami l'm Pesach. Mishum d'achar Pesach d'chazi l'Yisrael lo mechayv l'dagon l'mam l'afki mam l'dami. The halacha time we do let's say now I've skipped to the middle of Rashi. Rashi says, so what's going on over here? Why would it be that you're going to say if you hold in podin asak hachim v'achim l'klavim, you hold davar agoring l'mamon. Lav kimamon dami, so it's as if you did not commit an act of damage. So what's going on over here? Watch this. The opinion who says, follow this, because it's really just quite fascinating. It's not halach l'maisa, but it's interesting, which is right now in Rav Ashi's worldview, we hold. Also, you can't be podeh kachim in podeh mesa kachim achilon leklavim. Right. Number one, we do not redeem inedible kachim to feed it to dogs. That's one. Number two, davar hagorin lemamon lav kimamon dami. Something that is valueless now but will become valuable if you damage that item now. You are not chayiv for monetary damages. So we'll say, what's the machlokes in brayso? Watch this. The opinion holds that if you consume chametz of hektish on Pesach, on Pesach, that you are chayiv for that, that reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What's Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that it is mutter to get hana from chametz on Pesach. Wow. So then Rabbi Yossi said, what? Technically speaking, I could redeem chametz from the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach and ultimately go ahead and use it to kindle a fire. Can't eat it, but I could get benefits from it. I'm finishing Rashi. Therefore, I can go ahead and redeem it, use it as fire underneath my food. The opinion who says that you did not commit milah, he holds ultimately, again, like the Rabbanan who hold that chametz b'Pesach is aser bana. The imi shum the matzi the shira achras makrab shimen hashtemi elav mamonu. So we'll say ultimately again. So this is incredible. So Rav Ashi wants to suggest. We'll say so again. This kind of closes it. This kind of closes this sugya out. The last interpretation of the Brisa has Rav Ashi saying, number one, in Podines Akachim Lachin Leklavim, Aleph, Beis, Davra Gorin Lamamon, Lav Kim Mamon Dami. The Machlokis and the Brisa is Rabbi Yossi and the Rabban. The opinion who says that if you ate chametz that belonged to Ekdish on Pesach itself, that ultimately again you are going to be chayiv. That is because Rabbi Yossi holds that chametz on Pesach is mutter ba'ana. And therefore, technically speaking, you could redeem the chametz from the Beis Hamikdash, and you can go ahead and use it to go ahead and kindle your fire. Versus the opinion who says lo ma'al is the Rabbanon, who hold that ultimately again there is an isur hana of chametz on Pesach as well, and therefore the item is totally inconsequential. Beautiful. Amarav. Let's go back there. Amarav. Chametz bismano. I will say just you should know halacha l'maisa. We paskin like Rava's interpretation of the Mishnah, that the concept of chametz shavar lava pesach, we'll talk about this more, but the concept of chametz shavar pesach is a knas. It is a penalty. That's it. It's not a daraisa. It's not learned out from a pasuk. The concept of chametz shavar lava pesach is a rabbinic penalty. You were in violation of bal yiro'eh. You kept chametz illegally. Therefore, the Rabbanan gave you a what do they call it? The slap on the wrist. Is that the lashon? Right, the slap on the wrist. And therefore, your chametz is going to be asr bana for you and for any other Jew after Pesach. Obviously, we don't hold that the chametz of an achri is asr after Pesach because the logic is found in the Mishnah. Beautiful. So Gemara goes weiter. Amarav chametz bismanos. We'll say now we're going to get into the interesting discussion regarding ta'arobes chametz. What happens about mixtures of chametz? So watch this. Amarav chametz bismano. So we'll say chametz bismano means chametz on Pesach itself. Bein bamino, bein shloros. Let me give you a little bit of background. So we'll say in the world of ta'arobes. So some of you remember this from our chulin days, but in the world of ta'arobes, in the world of mixtures, so halacha l'maisa, there are two different types of mixtures. There's what's called min bamino and min b'she'ino mino, which means you have a mixture of two like items. That's min bamino, or two dissimilar items. In halacha, there's a machlokes if those mixtures are treated the same or treated differently. So we're going to see that now. Here we go. So Amarav Rav said chametz bismano, chametz on Pesach itself, bein bamino, bein shelo bamino aser. Whether chametz gets mixed in bamino with a like item, or a dissimilar item, it is going to be aser. I will say now, what's the chiddush over here? The chiddush what says we're going to see is what Rav is saying is chametz on Pesach is aser b'mashahu. So we'll say during the rest of the year, we have concepts like bittul barov or bittul b'shishim, a whole bunch of other different types of concepts. On Pesach itself, the severity of chametz says that chametz is aser even b'mashahu. Chametz is not batal. Chametz is not batal at all. And therefore, again, Rav is suggesting if chametz gets mixed in with something permitted, whether it's mino or eno mino, a like item, dissimilar item, doesn't make a difference. The mixture becomes aser. Shelo bismano. What happens shelo bismano? So we'll say, so remember again, we'll define exactly what this means, shelo bismano. But we'll say, but bepashtos, what this means is before Pesach, after Pesach. So the Gemara says, the mino aser, if chametz gets mixed in with a similar type of item, then it's going to be aser. Shelo b'mino mutter. Ultimately, again, but if it gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, it's going to be mutter. So you're asking, well, what's the case? I will say, if you would say that the chametz that we're talking about infuses flavor into the mixture, so let's say you have a very potent piece of chametz, whatever it might be, and it infuses flavor into the mixture, shelo bismano, shelo b'mino mutter. Then you're going to tell me if it's shelo bismano, even if it's, let's say let's say between the 6 hours and the start of Pesach. Right, and it's shelo bismano and it's shelo b'mino. that's going to be mutter. Ha yohiv taima. Both at the end of the day, it's infusing taste. Ella b'mashu. Rather, both you have to be talking about. We're talking about chametz over here. That's not no same time. It doesn't infuse flavor, and therefore, it's a minute amount of chametz. So we'll say, so what's happening over here? Chametz bismano. If we're talking about chametz during Shas Isra, i.e., during Yom Tov itself, bein bamino, bein shelo bamino aser, whether chametz gets mixed in with a like, with a like item or a dissimilar item is going to be aser. So we'll say, so Rav holds that halacha lemaisa chametz on Pesach, if it gets mixed in with anything, mino, she'eno mino, it is going to aser the tarobas. It is going to aser the mixture. And Rav Latame, the Rav Shmuel Amrit Havayu, kol isurin shebetorah, b'mino b'mashu, shelo b'mino b'no same time. Ultimately, again, Rav and Shmuel both say that halacha l'mais in general, both say when it comes to all these surim in the Torah, if they get mixed in with like items, we'll say if you have an item of iser that gets mixed in with exact same item of heter, so any amount of iser is going to aser the mixture. Shelo b'mino, but if it gets mixed in with a dissimilar item b'no same time, the mixture is only prohibited if the prohibited substance infuses taste. Rav gozer chametz bismano shelo b'mino, atu mino. Rav says that we have to be gozer chametz bismano shelo b'mino. So we're going to answer chametz that goes ahead and gets mixed in. Chametz that gets mixed in on Pesach. Chametz on Pesach that gets mixed in shelo b'mino. We're going to answer that, lest you come to confuse that with the case of chametz b'mino. So we'll see what's happening. So technically speaking, if you have a davar ha'aser that gets mixed in shelo b'mino with dissimilar items, the davar ha'aser only asers the mixture if the iser item infuses taste. But if it doesn't infuse taste, then it's not going to be aser. Rav will say, however, when chametz gets mixed in on Pesach with something, even if it gets mixed in shelo b'mino with a dissimilar item, it's still going to be aser, even if it's a small amount, even if it's not no same time. Why? Lest you come to confuse it with the case of mino. Because I will say, again, we're concerned that you're going to confuse the case of eno mino with mino, and you're going to say that just like, again, you need a significant amount of chametz to aser a dissimilar mixture, that you're going to need a significant amount of chametz to aser a similar mixture, and that's not the case. Chametz that falls into mino is aser b'mashu, v'shelo b'zmano b'mino aser k'Rav Yehuda. And ultimately, again, chametz shelo b'zmano will be aser, even if it gets mixed in b'mino. Ultimately, again, like Rabbi Yehuda. So let's remember again, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that chametz after Pesach, chametz shalav Pesach, is going to be aser mid'oraisa. V'shelo b'mino mutar. V'shelo b'mino mutar. V'shelo b'zmano. And ultimately, again, I will say, v'shelo b'mino mutar. V'shelo b'zmano. V'shelo b'mino atomino kuli halo gazino. I will say, but halacha l'maisa, if after Pesach, chametz shalav Pesach falls in, gets mixed in together with shelo b'mino, something dissimilar, that's going to be mutter. Why? Because we will say we're not concerned the shelo bismano v'shelo b'mino ato mino, because kuli halo gazino. We're not concerned on both sides that with chametz shalav Pesach, that if we go ahead and we permit shelo bismano shelo b'mino, chametz after Pesach that gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, we are not concerned that you may come to go ahead and therefore rule leniently in a case of chametz that falls in bimino bismano. Okay, so we'll say this is the position of Rav. Shmuel holds, again, we're gonna build on these. Shmuel says chametz bismano chametz bismano bimino aser. So Shmuel holds that chametz on Pesach itself, bimino, when chametz on Pesach that gets mixed in with a similar permitted item, aser is going to be aser. Shelo b'mino mutter. But if chametz even on Pesach gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, ultimately again it's going to be mutter. The mixture is mutter. Shelo b'zmano, but ultimately again after Pesach, bein b'mino, bein shelo b'mino mutter. So we'll say according to Shmuel, if chametz shalav Pesach gets mixed in, whether it's mixed in with mino or she'ino mino, it's going to be mutter. Chametz b'zmano mino b'mino aser. So let's analyze this. Shmuel holds that chametz on Pesach itself that gets mixed in with a similar item is going to be aser. Shmuel l'tamei, the Rabbi Shmuel Damit Harbayu, kol isurin shebetorah b'mino asun b'mashu shelo b'mino b'no sin tam. Because both Shmuel, both Rabbi and Shmuel hold that halacha l'maisa, any iser that gets mixed in with something mutter, halacha l'maisa again, when it gets mixed in with similar items. So then halacha l'maisa is going to be asr mashu, any amount. Shelo b'mino, dissimilar items, the davar ha'asr will only asr the mixture if it's no same time, if it infuses flavor. Shelo b'mina, so the Gemara says, now watch this. Shelo b'minan, atu minan lo gazer. And Shmuel, unlike Rab, Shmuel is not concerned that halacha l'maisa, we don't say, we're not worried that if we permit a mixture of min b'she'ino mino, chametz that gets mixed in with dissimilar items, we are not worried that if we permit that mixture, that you may come to also permit a mixture of min b'mino, of two similar items. So the Gemara says, shelo b'minan, atu minan lo gazer. Shelo bizmano, bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan, mitarik Rabbi Shimon. And mostly when it comes to chametz sha'ava alav pesach, once that gets mixed in with something, ultimately, again, whether b'mino or she'ino b'mino, ultimately, again, that is going to be mutter, like Rabbi Shimon. Remember again, Rabbi Shimon holds that chametz she'avar lava pesach is only asur after Pesach. Why? Because of a knas. So the rabbinic penalty only applied, according to Shmuel, when the chametz is be'en, when the chametz is, is extant, it's there by itself. But if the chametz has been mixed into something else, then halacha l'maisa the isur doesn't apply. But Rabbi Yochanan says chametz bismano bein b'mino bein shelo b'mino asur. So now watch this, the third sheet though. Rabbi Yochanan holds that chametz on Pesach itself, bein b'mino bein shelo b'mino asur, whether it was mixed in with similar or dissimilar items, it is going to be asur. Asur b'no same time. We'll say it'll be asur as long as there's enough chametz to infuse taste. Shelo bizmano, when it's after Pesach, bein b'minon bein shelo b'minon mutter. But after Pesach, I will say if chametz gets mixed in with anything, it is going to be mutter. Chametz bizmano, bein b'mino bein shelo b'mino b'no same time. I will say, let's analyze this. Chametz on Pesach itself, whether it gets mixed in b'mino or shelo b'mino, it is going to be asur if it infuses taste. Rabbi Yochanan l'tamei. Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning. The Rabbi Yochanan v'reish lakish amit havayu kol isurin shebatorah, all isurin in the Torah will say bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan, whether ultimately again they get mixed in with their min or not with their min, they get mixed in with similar or dissimilar items. What's the halacha? I'm sorry. Bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan, b'no same time. So we'll say it's very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish hold that this is in contrast to Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel both hold that whenever an asur item gets mixed in, so Rav and Shmuel make a distinction ultimately again between minan and she'inan minan. That halacha l'maisa again, when it's minan, then it's going to be asur. When it's shelo b'minan, it's going to be b'no same time. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish hold kol isurin shebatorah bein b'minan bein shelo b'minan b'no same time. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish hold that halacha l'maisa, anytime there is a mixture, whether it's b'minan, shelo b'minan, everything depends ultimately again, is there enough chametz there or enough isur there to infuse taste? Shelo bizmano, bein b'mino, bein she'ino b'mino, mutar Rabbi Shimon. Both have a chametz shelo b'alav pesach. Ultimately, again, whether it gets mixed in b'minan or b'shelo b'minan, will be much like Rabbi Shimon, who holds that chametz shelo b'alav pesach is only asur al tzeknas, not asur min da'oraisa, and it's only asur when the chametz itself is extant by itself. But if the chametz gets mixed in, that is going to be mutter. Bosai, we will stop over here for today. I'm going to leave you a little bit on a cliffhanger. We will see ultimately again the halacha l'maisa on this sugya. Bosai, this is actually an incredibly important sugya. This is the sugya of ta'arobes chametz, right? What do you do about mixtures of chametz? We all know chametz is asur. What about chametz that gets mixed into something else? What are the halachas concerning ta'arobes chametz? And Meretz Hashem, we will see the halacha l'maisa tomorrow. I'll say thank you all. Such a schus to learn with all of you. Have a wonderful day. Shekayach, everyone.